Welcome to episode 65 of Kratom Sobriety. This is Charlie, and I'm doing the opening this week solo. I'm going to respond to some feedback that we got about the podcast. Hopefully it won't be too meta, and I won't be too defensive about it. We're going to hear from the whole team throughout the episode. First, in the interview, Hilary and Decima sit down. This is a good change from the last three episodes where we had guys as guests, and it's good to get back some equilibrium in our gender balance. Then Jacob does a Kratom in the headlines about a Kratom-only death recognized in the academic literature in Europe. Many of the same people that say Kratom isn't addictive also falsely claim that there's no way to die from Kratom and that it's impossible to die from Kratom alone. These Kratom deaths are rare, but it's just a falsehood to say it's never been proven. There's lots of evidence, and this is just further documentation. Then, past contributor you've heard before, JP is going to talk about a scientific article about why these deaths might be occurring, which is related to there's certain interactions that put you more at risk from Kratom toxicity. Like in a layman's term, don't drink a gallon of grapefruit juice with Kratom. That might be a deadly mixture, and not to be too glib about it. So the feedback, thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments. It doesn't all have to be all praise. And we do want to strive to make the podcast better. And just a reminder, we're all amateurs here and we're learning as we're doing it. Really pleased that people listen and people do find it helpful. So the feedback, there's three buckets of comments that we get. So first, people tell us that we're a little too mat friendly or we're not cautious enough about Suboxone. It is true. We want this podcast to be a place where if you make that choice to use medicated assisted treatment, you are welcome here. You're not going to be ostracized. You're not going to be browbeated that you made a horrible decision. At the same time, we've been clear that we think Suboxone isn't for everybody. It should be your last thing that you try after resorting to everything else. None of that worked. We've been clear that using Suboxone to get off Kratom comes with risks. There's side effects. There's a potential to get addicted to Suboxone or abuse that. It is true that cold turkey withdrawal from Suboxone is magnitudes worse for many people than Kratom itself. We do and firmly believe that using medicated assisted treatment isn't trading one addiction for another. We rebuke that. I think that's antiquated. Please be cautious. Hopefully we've had stories of both pros and cons of Suboxone as a recovery option. Some of our guests have had bad experiences, and hopefully their voices have been as prominent as the ones that do choose to use that. A couple words of suggestion if you do choose to use Suboxone. One, advocate with your doctor to take the lowest dose possible that's effective. There does seem to be a pattern that the doctors prescribe too much milligrams per dose, and it can be just too strong for people. Second, do work with a doctor. Don't freelance it and participate in the treatment structure that's around the medicated assisted treatment. Don't just take the pill. Definitely do not cold turkey off Suboxone. You have to taper off over time. If you abruptly end using Suboxone, it's going to be hell, and we don't wish that on anybody. Sometimes access to the prescription abruptly ends and they can't renew it. They don't have money or the health insurance. There's sometimes shortages of it. Other people just get sick of it and they just make a decision cold turkey. And that's usually a really bad experience. And fourth, another pointer is it appears that using the Sublocade shot to wean yourself off at the tail end of a Suboxone prescription mitigates some of these concerns about getting off and tapering off the Suboxone. Second, another type of feedback we've gotten over time is that we should interrupt our guests less, not repeat our personal stories, let them just talk more. And we are mindful of this. We have, though, made an editorial decision to have our interviews be a conversation. We could make a content decision just to edit the questions all out and just let it be a monologue of the guest. But we wanted it to be a back and forth. We prefer that type of interview. We have gotten feedback, people like that. So we are going to continue to do that type of discussion with our guests. We try to shoot for the guests talking 75% of the time and us 25% of the time at most. Sometimes we mess that up. We have too much to say. Sometimes when there's an interruption, it's an editing error on my fault. I just wasn't able to fix the audio. So we do our interviews remotely through a web-based platform, and sometimes there's lag. Sometimes the timing of the discussions aren't in sync and we talk over each other. It is something that we try to address in the way we ask our questions during the interview and in the editing process. But we are going to continue with our format the way we're having conversational discussions with our guests. And number 3, we just got some feedback this last week that the guest that we had, James, in episode 64, since he wasn't committed to quitting Kratom entirely, he wasn't an appropriate person to have on the podcast. Another thing that we're thoughtful and we're aware of, we don't want to promote Kratom. We want to help people quit. And we know that part of the quitting process is you have to go through a process where you curb stop Kratom, where you actually demonize it in your own head. If you entertain thoughts about Kratom as positives and kind of romance with Kratom, it makes it harder to quit. So we're mindful in our interviews that we don't want to present those kind of messages. Sometimes we don't know how our discussion with the guest will turn out. And at the end of the week, that was the only interview we had, and we would have had to not run an episode last week if we didn't share that one. We also looked at it as an example of a harm reduction, an effective use of Kratom in a harm reducing way. James talked about he was doing Kratom plain leaf as a way to stay away from harder stuff. And he did reinforce the message of total sobriety is best. We don't want to be an echo chamber, and we do want to have diverse points of view presented on the podcast. We had Tyrone earlier on, and he was on the fence too, whether or not he was going to be a permanent quitter too. So in the future, it's going to be something that only happens once every 6 months. We'll always have a warning like Jacob did and give people a heads up that, hey, this is the context of this interview. If it's disagreeable to you, don't listen. And we'll try to in the future have those type of interviews be on a Wednesday special episode. Thank you very much. Keep sending your feedback. You can reach us on the social media channels or email me at kratomsobriety@gmail.com. And yeah, before we get to that interview, just a quick announcement. You remember Emily was a guest a month or 2 ago, and she, as a listener, decided to create this product, a supplement, multi-supplement to help you quit Kratom. And that product is now available, and you can find it at quitk.com. And we'd like to hear from you if you liked it or if you disliked it, both points of view, so we can pass that information on to our listeners. Now for that interview with Hilary and Decima. Thank you.
Hello, quitters. Decima here. I'm so excited to be talking with Hilary today. Hey, Hilary, how are you doing?
Hi, Decima. I am very well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. The sun is out, and that always makes for better moods, right?
Yep, and it's a beautiful day to be off Kratom, that's for sure.
I know that's right. Hilary, I'm really excited to interview you today, but first let's tell the guests a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Hilary. I'll be 28 in a few days here. I'm from Michigan. I spent most of my life there. I moved to North Carolina a couple years ago. I love all things psychology, astrology. I love researching. I love tarot, being active. Yoga is a big part of my life and my recovery as well. I live with my boyfriend and my cat Princess, and unfortunately, I am a Kratom addict. That's all. That's about it that I got for myself. I'm sure we'll talk about more.
I know you from the meetings, and you've been helping us out with some meetings on Monday night. So I've been so inspired by your journey, and I just have to tell you, we'll talk a little bit more as we go, but so much about our stories align. But when did you quit Kratom, if you have, and how? Let's see, let me rephrase that. Let's start over there. Tell us, have you quit Kratom, and if so, how long ago?
Yes, so I have quit Kratom, thankfully. I have many quits. So the very first time that I quit Kratom was back in 2020 when COVID was going on. I took Kratom from 2017 to 2020 pretty consistently, and I was really only addicted to it for about 2 years until I decided to quit. I started off using quite casually, I would say. But that first time that I quit was quite a shock, and I went to detox, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But right after detox, I had relapsed, which sent me into a cycle in which I relapsed maybe 6 times over the course of 6 more months. Then I finally found the online quitting Kratom community, and I was able to stay clean for almost 2 years. So that's the biggest stretch of time that I have clean after discovering Kratom from Kratom. But then, as we'll talk about, I had a death in my family. I had left the community. I relapsed maybe 5 more times over the course of the last 10 months. And now today, finally, I am happy to say I'm off of Kratom again. And it's been 37 days today.
So you're just going to go ahead and start right off the bat with some of the alignments that we have here because I also relapsed a lot. And I just wanted to note that because a lot of people do in the community seem to relapse a lot on Kratom. So, yeah. And I also had 2 years off of Kratom at one time. We'll talk about that later too because I want to know what you did different this time. So, how are you introduced to Kratom? And I also want to know what you were taking. Like, were you taking extracts, powder? How were you introduced to it, and what were you taking exactly?
Yeah, so I only took the capsules. I am actually really grateful that I never knew what an extract was until after I quit because I definitely would have graduated to that. I discovered Kratom back in 2017. I was, I think, 22 years old at the time. And I had a friend who was an addict as well. And I should back up a little bit more actually. Before Kratom, I had a Xanax problem. So I've been an addict before Kratom. Kratom was my worst addiction, but I had this friend that also had addiction problems. And I was talking to him about how, man, I really wish I could get off Xanax. I just go way too hard with it. I don't take it as prescribed. I lose days of my life and I'll go through my prescription in literally 1 week. And I will just lose all that time to sleep and whatever the hell that I would do because I wouldn't remember. But I was telling him I really wanted to get off of it and I didn't know how. And so he had asked me if I had ever tried Kratom before. And I was like, no, I've never heard of that. And I was surprised that I didn't know what it was because I was really into supplements back then. I was really like against big pharma. I didn't like to take, I've tried antidepressants back then at the time, didn't like those, didn't just really wanted to get off the Xanax. And I felt like big pharma was like profiting off of my addiction, in which it was. And Kratom will eventually as well. We'll find out. But he ended up giving me the rest of his bag and he said to just take 4 capsules, which is what I took. And yeah, that's how I discovered it. And I remember the first time I took it, I thought it was a vitamin. I thought it was akin to ashwagandha or black seed oil because I knew it was a plant, maybe even closer to marijuana, but I did not know it was an opioid. For years, I would use that as a way to evade responsibility for my kratom addiction. I would always say, the label didn't say, and it didn't. Back then in 2017, all it said was that the recommended dose was 4 capsules and that you have to be 21 plus to take it, and that was it. And so at first, I didn't know it was an opioid, but I realized that soon after, the first time I took it, I really didn't feel anything because I took it with food because I thought it was a vitamin. And I always took my vitamins with food. And
Okay.
so the first time I took it, I was like, that didn't really do anything. I don't know what he's talking about. But yeah, the second time I took it, it was on an empty stomach and I felt it. I felt that that buzz, and I knew exactly what it was after that point.
Did you throw up the first time?
No, surprisingly, I did not. I just took 4 capsules, which that recommended dose. If you can see me, I'm doing quotes in the air. Who is evaluating that? Yeah, no, I got really nauseous, but I did not throw up.
I threw up the first time. I've heard so many people say that. But yeah, the nausea
Yeah.
for sure. It's definitely hit you out of nowhere.
Mhm.
So it sounds like a lot of people, you discovered Kratom in an attempt to resolve yourself of another addiction. I did the same thing with found Kratom looking for something to come off of Suboxone. Yeah, and that should have been our clue that it worked, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the things that started happening in your life when you started using Kratom. Like, di- how did that go?
Yeah, so at first I used it quite casually, like I mentioned before. I got excited that second time when I realized what it was, that it was an opioid. And I thought to myself, wow, it's like I found some sleazy backdoor doctor that's going to write me a Vicodin prescription whenever I want. And so it's perfect because I can take this in between the times that I'm not taking Xanax because I would run out every single month. So I didn't really.
Uninterrupted supply. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, I had full access because I could afford it back in the day too. Yeah, I didn't really notice much of a difference until I decided that I was going to tell my doctor who was prescribing me Xanax to. I basically told him that I was an addict and I was abusing it and to please stop prescribing it to me. And back then, I thought that this was such a brave thing that I was doing, and it was. But I realize now that the only way I had any courage to do that was because I knew that I could fall back on Kratom if I really needed to. So, Kratom, it's hard for me to say this. It helped me in a way because it did help me get off of Xanax. But then I just went to using Kratom full time, and that's when I really started to get addicted to it without the Xanax. I have really bad anxiety. That's one of the reasons why I stayed on Kratom for so long. It treated my anxiety in the short term, but it would bounce back pretty soon after the dose would wear off. And so I'd have to take more and more and yeah, so after I finally got off the Xanax, that's when I started to really get addicted to Kratom.
What were some of the signs that you were addicted and that it was a problem? Were you having health issues and stuff from Kratom? Tell us about that.
Yes, the way that I realized I was addicted is it was like one day in 2018, about a year and a half into me using Kratom, that I ran out, and I lived in Michigan at the time, and I remember it was a blizzard and it was like 7:40, so the smoke shops were closing at 8 on Sunday, and I just didn't feel like making the drive, and I was like, you know what, it's no big deal. I'll just have some tea or smoke, do whatever to go to sleep tonight without my Kratom, and then when I wake up in the morning, I'll just go to the smoke shop on lunch. No big deal. But I realized pretty quickly when I woke up, I was sick. And I haven't mentioned this yet. I studied substance abuse treatment during undergrad and I minored in it actually. And so I knew what an opioid withdrawal looked like because of what I would learn about in school. And a part of me knew what was happening, but there was another part of me that would Google things like, why do I get a cold every time I wake up? What kind of sickness is this? Because I really wanted something external to tell me that this wasn't happening and that I wasn't addicted to Kratom. But I went to the shop and got my Kratom and I felt way better immediately. And so there was that part of me that I really worked hard to repress or suppress actually, that knew that I had a really bad problem and that I was unfortunately addicted to Kratom and that it wasn't just the Xanax, it was an addiction problem. It's not a substance problem for me. So I I just continued on and made a note to myself to never run out again. And I really didn't notice any big side effects until I increased my use. And the big factor that led me to taking it multiple times per day, really ramping up my use, was I got invited to this trip in Chicago to present some research that I did in undergrad. I was a psychology major and it was the Midwestern Psychological Association in 2019. And I was very proud of this. And so I took a trip. And also at this time in my life, I was the heaviest that I had ever weighed, which really wasn't even heavy. According to the BMI, I was like zero point 0.5 points overweight, which the BMI is bullshit according to me. But just to give you an idea of how distorted my body dysmorphia was, I just felt disgusted with my body. And in Chicago, there's all these reflective buildings, and my hotel room had this huge mirror. And the girl that I went with, she was just super beautiful and thin. And we went shopping for clothes, and I was just so embarrassed of the way that I looked, and it completely overshadowed this accomplishment for that should be such a special time in my life. And all I could think about was, oh my God, I'm so ugly. I had all these pictures taken of myself too, and I just couldn't enjoy this accomplishment. And so when I got back home, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to lose weight by any means possible. And so I got this idea that I was going to take Kratom as a weight loss supplement because I knew that opioids suppress the appetite. that whenever I took it, I would either not eat or eat less. And so I decided I was going to start taking it 3 times per day. Because before then, I was only taking it like once or twice, not as much to really lose weight successfully like I wanted to. My goal at first was to lose 20 pounds. And that's when I really started to notice the differences. I would say the biggest difference was the rapid weight loss. And at first, I know if anyone's ever had an eating disorder and even addiction too, there's the honeymoon phase, right? It's all fun and games at first until your body starts deteriorating and failing on you. But yeah, I would have these little plans of I would take my kratom, the biggest dose in the morning to skip breakfast, of course. And then I had a job. And so I would go and buy food from the cafeteria so that my coworkers would see me purchasing food because like a normal person would. And then I would go and have my kratom and have a Gatorade or something because I could never take kratom with water. It's so disgusting. And take my food in a plastic bag and just go park in some random parking lot far away and chew the food, spit out in the plastic bag, chug the Gatorade, and then take the kratom to give myself the illusion that I was eating and that I was full. And then go home, take kratom beforehand, maybe eat like half of my dinner, come up with a lie and say, oh, I had a big lunch, or I don't really feel good right now. And that was my plan. And so that's how I was able to lose 30 pounds over the course of, I don't know, whatever is 2 pounds per week. It was very rapid. But even then, like in those first 6 months, and when I finally surpassed my goal weight, which was 20 pounds I lost, and then overall I ended up losing nearly 45 pounds, it wasn't really that bad until about a year into doing this. And so when I first started this plan, I lived with family at first, and then I had moved in with my now ex-boyfriend at the time. And so it was difficult to execute it because there was people around that were holding me accountable just by being around me. And so I had to go to great lengths to hide this plan that I had and to hide the weight loss and how fast it was. But then me and that boyfriend, we broke up. And so I was able to move out on my own. I got promoted at work through all this somehow. And that's when my use really started to increase. And I had worked my way up to 50 grams per day. And so I was taking anywhere from 80 to 100 capsules per day. I would take 20 at a time, 4 to 5 times per day. It had gotten so bad where I would go days without eating food and just ingesting kratom. And so this is when I really started to notice the dizzy spells, the hair loss. My shower would drain. I constantly had to drain out my shower because I was losing hair. I had gray skin and I couldn't even open my eyes all the way because I was both starving and high off of kratom. And so when I look at pictures of myself back then, I just look so exhausted. And it's strange because back then I would look in the mirror and be like, wow, I look great. Like I look like a supermodel. And I'm just like this gaunt, ghastly figure, this poor girl. And yeah, falling asleep randomly. I started missing work meetings because we were virtual at the time because of the pandemic. So my work performance was starting to decline. I had a conflict with one of my ex-boyfriends I had after I had broken up with the one I had just mentioned. And he brought it up to me, saying, because I used to just take kratom out in the open because I thought nothing was wrong with it. And it's really jarring to take 15 to 20 capsules of something and the other person, that's a lot. And then I'm like, no, this is completely fine. And so he actually found the r/quitting kratom on Reddit, and he had brought this to me and said, I think that the kratom is making you sick. All these people are talking about these symptoms that you complain about too. And I did what I had to do to shut that down. And I just told him, you're never going to bring this up to me again if you want to stay with me. I was experiencing relationship problems because of it, work problems, health problems. I lost my period because I had lost so much weight and I had become officially underweight according to I couldn't sleep. Like my sleep was broken. I could only sleep for 4 hours at a time because one, I was starving, and two, I needed to dose again. And so eventually my life just completely revolved around kratom. It just creeped up on me. At this point, I had been using for 4 years and no one knew except for the boyfriend that I had that brought it up to me. I ended up breaking up with him because he was a barrier to my use. So yeah, that's just like the bulk of the symptoms that I had experienced, but there's so much more that I can't think of it all right now.
Oh, I know what you mean. It just causes so many issues in every area of your life. And I wanted to talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about you were talking about basically using Kratom as a tool. And let me just go ahead and give a little trigger warning here. We've touched on it a little bit, but if you guys want to fast forward, if you're listening out 3 or 4 minutes, we are going to talk a little bit about eating disorders. But I wanted to touch on that because you mentioned how you basically used it as a tool for, let's just call it what it is, anorexia. Back
Hmm.
in the day, we had Dexatrim and Accutrim and stuff, and everything you're describing sounds like that. And I also lost a ton of weight on Kratom. And when I look back at photos and stuff, like you're saying, I see like how skinny I was. I don't see how unhealthy I was. So I want to ask you, are you worried about gaining the weight back? And yeah, how will we deal with that? Because I'm dealing with that.
Yeah, I already have gained the weight back. I'm thankfully, in some ways, because I struggle with this, I am thankful to be back at a healthy weight. It's really difficult because I had fallen in love with the image that I had curated and had worked so hard for, because starving yourself is literally the hardest thing that I've ever done, is starving myself to lose weight. It takes just an immense amount of, it sounds paradoxical, but strength to lose weight that way and to lose it the healthy way, of course. But even with Kratom, it was extraordinarily difficult. And I, in a way, feel like I lost all of that work that I had put into. It was something that I was proud of. And body image concerns, I don't know if that will ever go away for me, actually.
Right.
And I
Huh.
just, yeah, it really is. Because I don't know if I will ever be okay with the way I look, but I try to remind myself that even when I was at my lowest weight, I still wasn't happy. I could still see areas of my
Yeah.
body where the fat just wasn't coming off. It didn't matter if I didn't eat for days, if I would walk 50,000 steps that day. I have to remind myself. It's like a constant reminder that I'm doing all day long whenever I see myself or I get those thoughts of, you know what, you got to choose your hard, is what I learned in school. Choose your hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to be skinny. It's hard to be a healthy weight. And I'm going to have to choose being at a healthy weight because I want to have kids someday. I want to go back to school and get my master's degree. And I have all these goals that I want to work towards. And I love going to the gym. I couldn't do that on Kratom and not eating because I didn't have the energy to do that. And so I just have to constantly remind myself, really. That's pretty much how I'm able to do it.
Dealing with an eating disorder is a lot like, it's so much, almost exactly like dealing with an addiction, right? What do we say? We have to eat that elephant one bite at a time.
Mm.
I'm so thankful and grateful that you were vulnerable to share that with us. And I hope that you're able to continue to work on that as well as I am too.
Yes, of course.
What did rock bottom with Kratom look like for you? What was your final straw?
Okay, so rock bottom for me, it was hard for me to recognize it because I never lost my job. I never got into debt. I was fortunate enough to be able to afford my habit and I never became homeless or anything. Of course, I experienced negative consequences, but for me, it was really just getting fed up. And I had made a friend who was also an addict, a new friend, and she ended up moving in with me. And so it wasn't really necessarily a rock bottom for me that started my quit. It was more of like divine timing. I really think that my spirit guides had intervened with this person, and so it was with her help that I was able to get off of it because I knew that what I was doing was not sustainable. I knew that I was unhappy. There's different parts of me, and there was parts of me that was unhappy, and there was parts of me that thought that I was having the time of my life. So it was really just like the ambivalence of going back and forth. And so whenever I would catch myself in those moments of, okay, I'm not happy, let's do something about this, is where I decided to really try to pursue recovery and abstinence from Kratom. I did go to detox, and what had led me to go to detox is it was really the work performance thing. The fact that I was falling asleep and just missing meetings and not following up with my clients because I was actually a social worker who worked with addicts and the hypocrisy of it all. And it just got to be too much, and it increased my anxiety by tenfold because what I was doing was really wrong. And I just felt like a complete fraud. And so I had arranged for myself to go to detox in 2020. That experience just wasn't really it for me. I arranged for myself to go like 4 hours away because number one, I didn't want to see any of my clients there because I was from a small town, and two, I just didn't want anybody to know that it was Kratom or that I had this problem. I was so embarrassed because at that point I had still not found the quitting Kratom community. I was just this weirdo that got addicted to a plant, this anomaly in my head. But yeah, going to detox, the lady had to look up what kratom was, and I did the urine test, and she was like, "Yep, you only came back for marijuana." And so I had to explain to her, like, "Yep, it doesn't show up on tests yet. I
Yep.
hope that we're moving towards that." Yeah, and I just really didn't have a good experience. I would lie to people and say that it really wasn't a lie, but I would say that I was in there for opioids, but I knew that they were thinking, "Oh, I'm talking about prescription pills." And there was one guy that pressed me further. He was like, "Oh, which one? Norco, whatever." And I was like, "Oh, it's actually Kratom." And he was like, "What?" Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I was in there with people who were alcoholics or suffering from alcoholism, rather, addicted to meth, crack, and and then I was in there for Kratom. And I would always say during those meetings, "I don't belong here. I take a supplement. I have my herbal medicine." I used to call it my medicine, and I just need to get back to it. And so I left after 3 days and I relapsed. So I would say I never really quite hit rock bottom. It was more me just getting fed up with the consequences that I was experiencing. But once my friend finally moved in with me in 2021, about a year later after I did detox, I was finally able to quit. And my first quit was, besides the detox, the 3-day detox, it lasted for 6 weeks. But then that got me into a cycle of quitting, withdrawing, and relapsing, just like over the course of 6 months until I finally found the quitting Kratom community. And that was what really did it for me.
Yeah, that quitting Kratom community changes everything. It is a complete game changer, if you ask
Yeah.
me. Okay, tell us a little bit about how you quit. Did you taper off? Did you go cold turkey? How did you use medications? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I tried lots of different methods. I remember one time I went to my doctor and I told him about what was going on, and he too had to look it up. I told him it was an opiate and that I'm struggling to get off of it. I had actually asked for helper meds. I asked for, "What do you think about gabapentin or clonidine or anything like that?" And he was like, "No." He did offer me Suboxone, which at the time that I went to him, I was not at the deepest level of my addiction. I was not taking 50 grams per day, and I admittedly need to educate myself on the potency of Suboxone, but the way that I interpreted it at the time was that's going in the backwards direction. I think that it would have been, I don't know, like stronger than the kratom I was taking because I wasn't taking enough to warrant that, in my opinion. But I know that has helped so many people. So he ended up prescribing me naltrexone, which I took it a few times and it did prevent a relapse one time. It was actually creepy how well it worked when I tried to relapse, and I was like, "Oh, nothing happened. That's cool." But I had to get off of that because it made me quite depressed and I just really couldn't tolerate the side effects. And my insurance didn't cover Vivitrol, which I really wanted to get on at the time. Cold turkey was the way that I was able to quit successfully every single time. I have tried tapering so many times. I did a really fast taper during one of my quits, which was basically just like torture. The point of tapering to me is to do it so slow that you don't notice withdrawal. And I was like, "Oh, I just want to get off of this stuff. Let me just decrease it every single day." Like a 5-day taper. I should have just went cold turkey. But
Yeah.
yeah, what worked for me was cold turkey. And I know that during my last quit, I would delude myself with tapering a little bit. I had my plan that I was going to take, let's say, 3 capsules 5 times a day. I would take 3 in the morning, and then I'd be like, let me just take 6 for a little buzz, and then I'll just take 6 later, and then I'm still on track. And so that's obviously, for obvious reasons, not effective. And once I rediscovered the Kratom community, because I haven't mentioned it yet, but I actually, during my quit of almost 2 years, I ended up leaving the community about 4 months in, which is one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life
Same. Same.
yeah, I know, because I'm an addict for life, and I forgot that. Clean time makes me forget that I have this problem. And I forgot where I was going with this.
Call it the forgetter.
Yeah, like I have amnesia from all the Kratom, probably.
We
But
do it though. You're so right. We get on our path to recovery and we're like, oh, we don't need that anymore. We're good. I did the same thing after 2 years. Yep. Yep. Yep.
yep. And I forgot that it was it was the meetings that I go to, the Kratom specific meetings, that got me clean for those 2 years. And so I left it behind, and I didn't really need anything else besides these meetings to help keep me clean. I know this time around I'm taking DLPA and L-tyrosine for the post-acutes, because I had a really hard time with that the first time around, severe. It ended up causing me to change my whole life around. I moved out of state and quit my job, dropped out of grad school, all these things, because I was just so depressed. I couldn't handle it anymore. But what
Did you,
really, go ahead.
oh, no, did you have acute withdrawals? And if so, how did you deal with those?
Oh, yeah, every single time.
Yeah.
It gets harder every time. I'm sure that, yeah, the goosebumps, the sweating, the insomnia, the sneezing. Oh my God, the sneezing. Yawning, allergies, just the crying, the labile mood, all of it. And the first time that I had experienced this, not in detox, because in detox I had medicine to help me through it. The second time I quit, I was really taken aback, and it made me realize, holy shit, this is what I'm doing to my body. This is really fucked up. I would rather have COVID. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it is bad.
Yeah, so that's what I had for the acutes. The first time around, it only lasted for 5 days. But this last quit, I would say the acutes started to get better around day 9. So it really does get harder and longer each and every time I try to quit.
I would agree with that too. And whenever you do finally quit, it just something about this time, does it feel different for you? You just know, right?
Yeah, I'm hesitant right now because I said that last time I quit for that 2 years, and I thought back then that I knew that I was done and that I was never going to be turning back. And then I relapsed after all that time. And a part of me is, yes, of course, I know that this is it for me, but I can't be too sure. I don't want to jinx it or delude myself. But this time, what's different is that I know that I can't leave the community. I know that I know what I need to do to stay sober this time. And that relapse was really quite humbling in that way. It showed me what I need to be doing this time around, if that makes any sense.
It does. And Hillary, I just want to tell you, I I get it. I get the hesitation and you don't want to jinx it and this and that. I do, but I wanted to tell you, you have how many days did you say you have so just a little, you are about at the same point I was when I did my first interview with Charlie. I've seen you at these meetings. I've seen you in these chats offering support daily. You're already jumping in to be of service. Like you are doing all the things. And I have to tell you that the way that you are just jumping into this recovery, I have full faith in you. I just don't see you failing.
Appreciate that.
I hope that you could see yourself that way as well.
Yes, yeah, maybe it'll take a little bit of more time to feel more confident, but yeah, it's the only way I can stay sober, is to be reminded of this problem every day, unfortunately. And that was the error in my thinking when I left the group before, was that I don't need this anymore. And those 2 years that I was off of it were good for various reasons, but I really did miss the sense of community. I have never really felt like I 100% truly belonged anywhere besides groups like these, because you guys just get me, and there's no anxiety when I talk to you guys, or social anxiety. And it just, so this is what makes the difference, is is these resources and the people that have gone through exactly what I've gone through. And so this time around, I'm not leaving you guys, that's for sure. And if I do, I hope you guys reach out to me or
Oh,
send me a
I'll be in your
letter.
inbox. Absolutely. Look,
Yeah.
it's what I'm doing different too. It's for this whole
Mhm.
year, it's been something that I absolutely am doing different as well. It has to be a priority. We make our recovery a priority, and I just love that you're doing that. I see it every day. But okay, so I already know that the first 30 days of your quit have been absolutely amazing, but tell us a little bit about it. What has the first 30 days been like? Or what were
Yeah.
your first 30 days like?
Yeah, this time around, my first 30 days after I got through those 9 days of withdrawal symptoms, which felt like eternity, I was really quite euphoric in a way that obviously not kratom euphoric, but I just felt really hopeful and really excited. And I'm just so grateful and just like thanking myself every single day for finally making the decision to do this again. It was nice to lay out in the sun again and to just be present, and summer was just starting and it was really quite a beautiful time, and making sure I was taking my supplements, it got me through. I really didn't really get depressed like I was expecting or anxious. So days 9 through 30 were really quite a blast, and I'm missing them because days 30 through 7 have been a little bit more difficult because I think I'm hitting the post acute syndrome a little bit, not as hard as I have before. And I think that it's because I am taking the supplements and I am engaging daily and hosting meetings and things like that. But life after kratom is just so much easier. And like you always say, I would rather have a hard day sober than a good day on kratom. It's exponentially different.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah, it's been tough these past few days. I know that I've been mentioning in the meetings that like I've been struggling with anxiety really bad, but I just can't use kratom. And it's just not an option for me anymore. And even though I'm struggling with anxiety, I at least I don't have the burden of having to dose every 4 hours. There's that.
Absolutely. Things are not always going to be perfect, but I think things are always better either way. So you already mentioned the community and how supportive that is and how crucial that is in your recovery. Do you have any other support systems set up in your life outside of the Kratom recovery community?
Yes, actually, I live with my boyfriend who I actually hid this relapse from him for months, which was exhausting. And I didn't have to do that because he's like the most understanding and patient person I've ever met in my life. But I have him to talk to every single day. And this might sound silly. I have my cat. She can't really talk to me in English, but she understands English. I know that. And I have my parents in my life. I don't really talk to them too much about addiction, but I know that I have them as a support system. And really, you guys are like the biggest support I have, and my boyfriend. And I also have myself. So, yes, the support is what helps me get through, but also like a consistent routine of going to the gym and eating again, even though it is hard to deal with the weight gain and the thoughts about how many calories is this? Am I at my limit? I still have those thoughts. It's just so nice to have energy again and to be able to do yoga. Yoga with Adrienne is also a part of my support system on YouTube. She has great trauma informed yoga sessions for beginners. And yeah, so really all those things combined, I would consider my support system.
I fucking love that you included yourself in that, Hillary. That is
Yeah,
really, seriously, I need to remember that as well. Who better to support us than ourselves? Who
right.
knows us better, right? I love that. Thank you for that reminder.
Uh-huh.
So let's just move into some of the lighter topics here. If you were to give somebody a tip for quitting, if somebody came to you and said they wanted to quit Kratom, what would you tell them?
Oh, easy. www.kratommeetings.com.
Easy. It's so easy. But it is though. That's a great first step. You're right.
Yeah, no, it's not. I'm being facetious. It's not easy. It's so hard, but it really is easier with you guys. I would suggest talking to a kratom addict specifically. At least that's what I needed because I would try to go to NA, and I love NA. Those are awesome meetings, but I really felt like a little bit of an outsider and unsure of whether or not it's cool to be here. So talking to a kratom addict every day is what I would suggest, and engaging with the community every single day. I would say look into supplements based on the symptoms that you're having. Check out the Quitting Kratom subreddit, the menu tab, a wealth of resources, and find out what resonates with you and try it. And come up with a routine of exercise that you like, whether it's yoga, hiking. I love riding my bike, whatever works for you. Get to know yourself is a huge one too.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. You're going to get to know yourself too. You're going to get to know
Yeah.
your true self. So, speaking of getting to know yourself, if you come back and listen to this in a year, what's a message that you want to leave for yourself?
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Loaded, right?
Yeah, I hope that you are still engaging with the community. I hope that, rather, I have a lot of faith that you'll still be clean and that you are doing what's best for you. And a year from now, I would hope that you have maintained your goal of getting back into school. And if you didn't, I still love you. Man, this is like a unique question. And I'm just happy. Sounds silly. I'm happy to be you now that we're finally clean.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just hope that you're still killing it a year down the line. That's all I got.
I love it. I have faith in you too. Absolutely. I know it is a unique question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to tell? Oh, let me rephrase that. I just got all tongue-tied there. Is there anything else that you want to tell the community, Hillary, that we haven't talked about yet?
Nothing that we haven't really talked about. I just want to reiterate the engaging with the community aspect of it. I know for not just me, for most people that I talk to, we can't stay sober off of Kratom without our Kratom meetings and our chats and all of those things. So I just want to reiterate that. And there's nothing wrong with us. And if you're listening to this, I hope that we get a chance to talk soon and to share recovery stories. And that I look forward to seeing more people come out and talk about Kratom. I think that is a key, is to be open about our experiences, because Kratom is such a niche substance, drug, actually, in my opinion. And yeah, I just hope that we keep sharing.
You guys, Hillary means it too. She is one of the most supportive, active members in these chat groups. And not only Hillary, there's others there. They're all killing it, stacking days, and it's amazing, isn't it, Hillary, the way that we just
Yeah.
support each other. Thank you again for sharing with us, Hillary. I am so happy that you have 37 days, and I cannot wait to do the 1 year update with you next year.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Decima.
All right. I hope you have a great night.
Okay, you too.
Bringing the headlines. Hi, everybody. This is Jacob, bringing you this week's Kratom in the Headlines segment. So this week, our article comes from Medscape UK. Medscape is a UK publication that is geared toward healthcare professionals based in the United Kingdom. So this article is entitled "A Deadly Get-Together with a Plant-Based Preparation of Kratom." So this article focuses on a young man who was found lifeless in his bed one morning in Germany. And basically, essentially, the article talks a bit about how this gentleman had a history of depression, cannabis use, frequent seizures. He had actually abstained for drugs and alcohol for at least a year and had instead turned to herbal products, primarily Kratom. When the police found him, he had a number of things in his room: Kratom, some sort of balloons, it says, for intoxication purposes, assuming that's like nitrous or something, industrial hemp flowers, sleeping pills containing doxylamine succinate, which I think is a pretty common over-the-counter sleep medicine. And basically, his medical records revealed some prior narcotic use, regular kratom consumption, and he actually was hospitalized due to a seizure following a kratom overdose about 18 months before he passed. This is in Germany where this individual died. They did an autopsy where they found non-specific signs of intoxication, aspiration of gastric contents. There were concrete signs of a seizure were not observed, and there was no sort of evidence of recent or past intravenous drug use, no significant organ damage. urinalysis essentially only really detected from a drug perspective mitragynine metabolites. There were some traces of the sleeping pill found, but not enough to essentially impact and or kill him. No benzodiazepines, opioids, amphetamines, cocaine, anything like that. So basically, they did a full panel to look for even other drugs like MDMA and various other diet benzos, etc. None of that found in his system. So basically, this article is just clear another example highlighting a kratom-only death. I know that advocates oftentimes want to point to various other things that happened, but this is clearly a case of a gentleman that overdosed solely on kratom and or mitragynine and unfortunately passed away due to this. So this was essentially geared towards medical professionals to highlight that this can happen and to warn about the dangers of kratom use. Just to note that kratom is legal in Germany, but is actually illegal in the UK for possession. So a bit of a different law in the UK versus the United States or Germany, where kratom is mostly legal. So that's kratom in the headlines for this week. I hope you all have a great week.
Welcome to another segment of Resource of the Week. Today we're going to explore a topic that's crucial to understand for anybody kind of curious about kratom, and that's how inter-individual variability, or the difference between individuals, and the enzymes CYP3A4 may impact the metabolism, but consequently the toxicity of kratom alkaloids. Kratom has gained popularity in many parts of the world for its stimulant and analgesic properties, and this should come as no surprise to our listeners. The active primary compounds in kratom are mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, with emerging science on speciosiliatine. These alkaloids are metabolized by or have an inhibitory effect on the liver on the enzyme CYP3A4. But what does this exactly mean for kratom users? All right, so let's dive into the details based on the recent research between last year and this year, 2023 and 2024. First, let's talk about and define enzymes. Specifically, liver metabolizing enzymes. These enzymes play a pivotal role in metabolizing a wide range of substances, including drugs and natural compounds like mitragynine and other alkaloids from kratom. However, not everyone's activity is the same. Many studies have shown significant variability in specific enzyme activity between individuals. These enzyme differences are influenced by genetic, physiological, and external factors. Cytochrome P450 enzymes, known as CYPs or CYPs, are essential for metabolizing drugs, toxins, and endogenous compounds, with their study beginning in the early 20th century when research discovered their unique system in the liver. Named for their characteristic absorption peak at 450 nanometers when bound to carbon monoxide, CYP enzymes facilitate the oxidation and excretion of various substances. The CYP family includes multiple subfamilies, each with specific functions and tissue distributions such as CYP3A4, which is vital in drug metabolism and found mainly in the liver and the intestines. Today, understanding CYPs is crucial for predicting drug interactions, adverse reactions, and individual responses to medications, significantly advancing personalized medicine. Furthermore, CYP enzymes play roles in metabolizing endogenous compounds like steroids and fatty acids, with ongoing research uncovering new functions and regulatory mechanisms to the present time. There's still CYPs that are orphan. They have no idea what they do. Overall, CYP science has profoundly impacted drug development, personal medicine, and toxicology, underscoring its importance in modern medicine and scientific fields. In simple terms, CYPs can be thought of as workers in our bodies that break down substances to make them more easy to eliminate. Some people have more active workers, while others have fewer or less active ones. This variability means that individuals can metabolize substances at different rates, affecting the overall exposure and effects of those substances. We'll be focusing on one of these very important CYPs for the segment, as you can guess, and that's CYP3A4. Now, let's talk about these studies and how they contribute to this understanding of this activity at this enzyme location. According to Hustis et al. 2024, CYP3A4 is a key enzyme in the conversion of mitragynine to 7-hydroxymitragynine. We can deduce from this that variations in CYP3A4 activity can result in significant differences in the plasma concentrations of both compounds following kratom consumption. Consequently, one individual might metabolize mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine rapidly, while another may retain them longer in their system, potentially leading to varied effects and differing risks of toxicity. Mongar et al. 2024 explored the effects of CYP3A4 inhibitors like itraconazole on the pharmacokinetics or the breakdown of mitragynine. Their study found that inhibiting CYP3A4 significantly increased the plasma concentrations of mitragynine and decreases the formation of 7-hydroxymitragynine to 7-OH. This finding is crucial because it underscores the potential for drug interactions to influence the safety and efficacy of kratom. Tana et al. 2023 discusses the time-dependent inhibition of CYP3A4 by mitragynine itself, noting that repeated dosing can lead to accumulation of mitragynine. This accumulation is particularly concerning for individuals with reduced CYP3A4 function, as they may be at higher risk for adverse events or adverse effects. In essence, variability in CYP3A4 activity means that kratom can affect people very differently. Factors like genetics, other medications, and overall health can influence how CYP3A4 works. It's vital for kratom users to be aware of these differences and to approach kratom with caution, especially if they have health conditions or are consuming other drugs or foods that might interact with CYP3A4. To summarize, the interindividual variability in CYP3A4 activity significantly influences the metabolism and potential toxicity of kratom alkaloids, such as mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine. This variability means that different people may experience markedly different plasma concentrations of these compounds, leading to a range of effects and potential risks. For instance, individuals with higher CYP3A4 activity might metabolize these alkaloids more rapidly, minimizing this toxicity risk. Conversely, those with lower or impaired CYP3A4 activity might have prolonged exposure to these compounds, increasing both their efficacy and the likelihood of adverse events. This variability highlights the necessity of personalized considerations when assessing the safety and potential risks of kratom use. A one-size-fits-all approach to kratom consumption and regulation is insufficient. Instead, individualized assessments that consider genetic and metabolic differences are crucial for considering use. These personalized evaluations can help identify individuals at higher risks of adverse events. It is essential that such evaluations are conducted solely by qualified medical professionals that can take all of these different risks and variables into consideration for you. As we conclude today's episode, remember that understanding the metabolism of substances like kratom can lead to more informed decisions about their safety. Factors such as genetics, other medications, and overall health can significantly influence profiles of safety and tolerability. Being aware of these factors can help consumers and the curious alike to better understand and navigate the Wild West known as the kratom industry. Thanks for joining us for this segment of Resource of the Week. Thanks for having me, and until next time, keep it kratom free.